Hi, and welcome to Why Do Countries Exist, an episode on Lithuanian political parties. Today's episode was requested by Sam Volkers, Fyro, and Unknown User, all on YouTube. If you want me to do another country political parties, you can either comment them down below, send me an email, send me a message on Patreon for my patrons, shout out to Wyatt by the way, or send me a request through my feedback and request form in the description. I currently have requests to do Singaporean parties, Czech parties, Greenlandic parties, Hungarian parties, Thai parties, Swedish parties, Norwegian parties, Finnish parties, Latvian parties, Icelandic parties, and many more. I also want to give a shout out to Carlos for helping me write this episode. He sent me some emails back and forth and gave me a very detailed write-up on all the Lithuanian parties. All of that was very much appreciated. He also sent me voice memos with all the Lithuanian names in the episode, which theoretically will hopefully help my pronunciations. Will they actually? Probably not. But a man can dream. Lithuania, like many countries in Eastern Europe, has an unstable party system. In 1992, it saw the center-left take charge. Then in 1996, the center-right took charge. 2000 saw the Liberals take charge, although not with the most votes, and their government would collapse by 2001. The center-left would take over, being able to survive the 2004 election, although like their Liberal predecessors, not with the most votes. 2008 saw the center-right return, but in 2012 the center-left would come back again, but again without the most votes. 2016 saw, in a surprise upset, the Farmers and Greens Union coming out on top until the 2020 election, which saw the center-right return. The latest election in October of 2024 saw the center-left return to power. All of this is to say that Lithuanian politics tends to have very significant swings in terms of which party is in power, and new parties can rise and fall pretty quickly. While some core parties do have some staying power, a decent chunk of the electorate are willing to vote and abandon new parties at the drop of a hat. Lithuania's main legislative body is the Seimas. The Seimas is made up of 141 MPs, who are elected two ways. 71 are elected from 70 electoral districts found throughout the country, along with an overseas constituency via a two-round voting system. If a candidate wins a majority of the constituency vote, they will be elected. Although apparently there is also a kind of unique scenario in which case a candidate can win with less than a majority of the vote, but that will get more complicated. Otherwise, the two most voted for candidates will move on to a second round of voting, and whichever candidate gets the most votes there will be elected. The remaining 70 MPs are elected via proportional representation, with a party needing to win at least 5% of the vote in order to win proportional representation seats. If a party is running in a coalition with multiple parties, they need to win 7% of the vote. The Seimas will elect the Prime Minister, along with their cabinets, and the justices of the Constitutional Court will vote on rules and regulations, approves the budget, and ratifies treaties. Lithuania is also a member of the EU, with it sending 11 members to EU Parliament. So the largest and ruling party is the Social Democratic Party of Lithuania, or Lietuvos Socialdemokratų Partija, or LSDP. The LSDP is the oldest party in the country today, being founded in the late 19th century when Lithuania was under the Russian Empire. It was like many social democratic or leftist parties in the ex-Russian Empire in favor of national independence/autonomy while also promoting left-wing economic policies. It, after the Lithuanian War for Independence in the 1920s, became an important player in Lithuanian politics in the early 20s, until the Lithuanian dictator, Antanas Smetona, outlawed them and all other opposition parties. It remained underground and largely in exile during World War II and Soviet rule, but re-emerged in 1990 as an important center-left force, but behind the Democratic Labour Party of Lithuania, the de facto successor to the Communist Party of Lithuania. Until in 2001, when the Democratic Labour Party merged into the LSDP. It has since then remained the main center-left force in the country. Well, kind of. It has been a part of several different governments throughout the years, including this most recent one when it emerged as the most voted for party. Its main support base is broadly more rural, or from smaller cities, and to a certain extent among ethnic minorities like Poles and Russians. It broadly tends to be the party representing those who look fondly on the Soviet days, and those opposed to the center-right in the country, who we will get to later. It currently has 52 MPs, and sends 2 members to EU Parliament, who sit in the Progressive Alliance of Socialists and Democrats. It is currently headed by Gintautas Paluckas, AMP, and current Prime Minister of the country. Gitanas Nausėda, the current president, while not a member of the party, was elected with LSDP support. The party broadly could be defined as economically leaning left and socially centrist. Economically, it supports the development of a state development bank, supports progressive taxes, backs the move to a 4-day workweek for most workers, wants more investment to help families with children, and wants more investment into rural schools. Socially, the party is divided between a more progressive wing and a more conservative wing, with the more progressive, or maybe a quietist, wing seemingly in charge, staying largely silent on gay marriage and marijuana legalization, not wanting to alienate voters. In terms of foreign policy, it does mostly follow a pro-West course, supporting Lithuania's inclusion in the EU and NATO, while also arguing Lithuania should seek to normalize relations with the People's Republic of China after a diplomatic incident in late 2021 caused tensions in the country between the two. It also tends to be viewed as soft or pragmatic on Russia, especially before the Russian invasion of Ukraine, although nowadays its foreign policy is viewed as falling in line with other Lithuanian political parties, and supports more autonomy at the local level. The LSDP did see victory in the latest election, but almost right away after the election experienced controversy. An important campaign promise they made was that they wouldn't work with the Dawn of Nemunas party, and the party's prime ministerial candidate would be Vilija Blinkevičiūtė, a popular MEP from the party. Blinkevičiūtė will be replaced instead by Paluckas, an uninspiring figure as prime minister, and they would sign a coalition agreement with Dawn of Nemunas. This has made a considerable chunk of the electorate sour on the party, viewing it as have cynically played the game of politics to get into power without any principles. The lack of principles accusation is also thrown at the party pretty frequently for its policies, as socially it tends to be very muted, and economically it's viewed as not that different from its main center-right rivals. While it's supposed to represent the main center-left voice in Lithuania, it often ends up just being a hodgepodge of personalities and policies, all just opposed to the main center-right party. This confusing messaging has led the party to suffer infighting and several breakoffs throughout the years. It also has been accused of corruption, and its foreign policy's positions towards China are often controversial, and viewed as being somewhat soft towards the EU's geopolitical rivals. The aftermath of the election, along with the general baggage around the party, means it's likely going to suffer a similar fate it has when in government previously, a loss in its dominant position in the Seimas, and it either becoming a junior partner in the government or falling into the opposition. I mentioned the Dawn of Nemunas, or Nemuno Aušra, or NA, so let's talk about them. Nemunas is, by the way, a reference to the longest river in the country, in case you are curious. NA was formed very recently by party leader Remigijus Žemaitaitis in 2023. Žemaitaitis previously had been an MP for the center-right Union Party until he was removed in 2023. This was due to several Facebook posts criticizing Israel, containing a Lithuanian jingle about killing Jews, and saying, and this is 100% going to remove any possibility of this episode being monetized, saying there was a Holocaust of Lithuanians which was greater than that of the Jews. Žemaitaitis resigned from the Seimas due to the possibility of him being impeached and therefore barred from running or holding office. But also, he began to receive a large following, presenting himself as an outsider to the political system and rallying against corruption and the political establishment. Žemaitaitis would form the party in 2023 and run for president in 2004. While he came only in 4th place, it had proved that he had some staying power, and in legislative elections later that year, ended up as the 3rd most voted for party. NA has had a lot of labels thrown at it: populist, nationalistic, far-right, socially conservative, and just loyal to Žemaitaitis. He received a lot of support from those upset and disillusioned with the political system in the country, and with more support in the Žemaitija region in the west. It currently has 19 MPs. Žemaitaitis is an MP. NA economically tends to be more interventionist, but also socially more conservative. It supports the creation of a state development bank and supports cash payments towards families with children, but also has said they opposed increased corporate taxes. Its economic policy is viewed as being very vague, more focused on rallying against corruption. Socially, it has firmer positions, opposing gay marriage and marijuana legalization, hostile towards increased immigration, and seemingly, based on Žemaitaitis' comments, might have a more revisionist view of Lithuanian history. While it isn't exactly pro-Russian, It is viewed as of being soft or pragmatic on Russia, and being skeptical of Ukrainian integration into the EU, or at least promoting delays in letting them join. Žemaitaitis also said his controversial comments was just him showing support for Palestine. Now, the last paragraph, I've been talking about what NA believes in, but that's probably a little bit of a misnomer. The party is largely a vehicle for Žemaitaitis and his loyalists, and outside of him, there aren't really any important figures in the party. It also is probably a misnomer to say Žemaitaitis, or NA, has really strong convictions on most issues. It's generally viewed as saying whatever is the most anti-government at the time in order to win over dissatisfied voters, and doesn't actually have any real plan in running the country. Unsurprisingly, considering why it was formed, Žemaitaitis is viewed as an extremely controversial figure, promoting anti-Semitism and being xenophobic. This has made the party before the 2024 election despised by all other parties, and everyone, including the LSDP, promised to not work with them. However, after the election, the LSDP decided to work with them, immediately sparking backlash from both other Lithuanian parties and the international community, with several of Lithuania's allies condemning the inclusion of NA in the government, with it being seen as just that toxic. This has all led its opponents to worry about Lithuania's standing on the world stage, and its coalition partners to refuse to give the party any ministerial positions, only allowing them to endorse independent ministers. This puts the party in an awkward place in the long run, as it will become harder for them to present themselves as outsiders, considering they are in government with a major and long-established Lithuanian party, the LSDP, but without any ministers, it will be difficult to get any real power or get any of their major policies passed. The final party in the ruling coalition is the Union of Democrats for Lithuania, or Demokratų Sąjunga Vardan Lietuvos, or DSVL. DSVL was formed in 2022 as a breakoff of the Farmers and Greens Union I briefly mentioned earlier. It was based largely around Saulius Skverneris, the Prime Minister of the country from 2016 to 2020. Skverneris has always tried to present himself as a technocratic politician, always willing to speak his mind. This created friction between him and the Farmers and Green Union, which led to him creating his own force. When looking at Wikipedia, it labels it as a social democratic and green conservative party, which, if you squint, I guess is kinda true. Carlos in his emails described it as centrist and inoffensive, a party for people who just want a practical government that will carry out sensible, center-left economics. It got the most support last election in southern Lithuania. It currently has 14 MPs and sends one member to EU Parliament, who sits in the Green/European Free Alliance group. Skverneris remains its leader and also currently is an MP and Speaker of the Seimas. DSVL is economically center-left, somewhat socially conservative, and pro-EU. It supports progressive taxes, wants more investment in welfare, backs greater union rights, and supports a basic income. It opposes the legalization of marijuana and increased immigration. It officially opposes gay marriage, but favors a somewhat quietist position, opposing, quote, turning this issue into a tool of cultural warfare, end quote. It does officially promote an environmentalist message, supporting a clean environment, although many traditional environmentalist policies are not backed by the party. In terms of foreign policy, it is supportive of the EU and NATO, and supports increasing the defense budget. DSVL is in some ways similar to NA, having a weak ideology and being a party based around largely a single figure. It's seen as largely being by and for Skverneris loyalist. It ideologically doesn't really have that strong groundwork. While the technocratic, centrist, pro-EU message seems to be the main through line of the party, this messaging is rather muddled, considering the vagueness it often deploys for many of its messages, and its coalition partners like NA being more populist. The government agreement with NA also created problems as those hostile towards NA viewed the party as helping set up the agreement, which ironically has resulted in a lot of infighting, as Skverneris and Žemaitaitis have been openly combative towards each other at several points. It ultimately, and all of its coalition partners, are parties that are in an awkward position, and it will be very interesting to see if they are able to last a full 4 years, or if they break apart before then. So let's go to the opposition, with the largest opposition party being the Homeland Union-Lithuanian Christian Democrats, or Tėvynės Sąjunga Lietuvos Krikščionys Demokratai, or TS-LKD. TS-LKD was created from a merger of two parties, the Homeland Union, a center-right conservative party that was a powerful force in the 90s and 2000s, and the Lithuanian Christian Democrats, a Christian democratic party that was formed in 1905 and was an important player in interwar Lithuania, and then reformed after the end of Soviet rule in the 90s. In 2008, both parties merged together that year and won parliamentary elections, and have been a very imposing figure in Lithuanian politics since. The traditional narrative of the party is it has served as the main center-right force standing in opposition to the LSDP. Ideologically, this narrative does get a bit awkward, but in terms of support base, it is pretty clear, with the party getting more support among those who have a negative view of the Soviet Union and live in urban areas like Vilnius and Kaunas. It also tends to be supported by younger people, those with a university education, and the diaspora. It currently has 28 MPs and sends 3 members to EU Parliament, the most out of any party, who sit in the European People's Party group. It is currently headed by Laurynas Kasčiūnas, AMP, and former Minister of Defense. The party does subscribe to general European center-right ideas, like economic liberalism and support for the EU. It supports a free market economy, and Vytautas Landsbergis, the leader of the country when it transitioned out of Soviet rule and a founder of the Homeland Union, did liberalize the economy when in charge. In terms of foreign policy, it aligns with a lot of pro-Western positions, being pro-EU, pro-NATO, pro-Taiwanese, heading the dispute with the PRC in late 2021, supportive of the Belarusian opposition, pro-Ukrainian, and Kasčiūnas seems to be pro-Israeli. Socially, however, it can start to differ between its various factions. Some factions of the party are in favor of gay marriage, while others are more skeptical towards it. Officially, the party allows its MPs to have their own individual thoughts on the issue, which often de facto results in the party being more progressive on the issue compared to the left of the country. It also economically can vary beyond just dogmatic right-wing economics, with it supporting progressive taxes and seeks to promote a circular economy. It often ends up as being a very technocratic party, in contrast to its more populist rivals. The party is a very powerful force in Lithuania, and debatably the most important. But also debatably is the most hated. It is viewed by many populists as the establishment, and a party that is very much by and for political elites. The party always seems to end up in government during important turning points in Lithuanian history, right after independence, the 2008 crisis, and COVID, and its policies often are very polarizing. The liberalization it promoted in the 90s, austerity after 2008, and lockdowns in the 2010s led a lot of people to become deeply resentful towards the party. While its supporters argued it had to carry out tough decisions during these times of national crisis, many of its opponents view it as out of touch and harming the average Lithuanian. While the biggest opponent of the party is the LSDP and TS-LKD often are called out for being not that radically different from each other. While both theoretically lean towards different economic positions, both often de facto support the same policies. Both promise change when they get into government, but leave 4 years later after the Electoral gets sick of them, which is what happened this latest election, as Lithuanians wanted to see some change after 4 years of TS-LKD rule. Its leaders also tend to be controversial, as Landsbergis and his son, Gabrielius Landsbergis, who would later lead the party, have several conspiracy theories around them. Kasčiūnas in his youth was a member of a small neo-Nazi party and has been sympathetic towards far-right groups like the AfD and Orban. TS-LKD is in opposition with the Liberals movement, or Liberalų Sąjūdis, or LS. LS was formed in 2006 as a breakoff of another liberal party, the Liberal and Center Union. It initially was like the Union, a center-right liberal party, but today it tends to be more solidly just liberal, although with factions leaning left or right. It has been fairly friendly with the TS-LKD, working with them in government from 2008 to 2012, and again in 2020 to 2024. While it does have some competition from other liberal groups, as you'll see later, it tends to represent the main liberal bloc in the country, being supported by those who want a liberal economy and society. It tends to get the most support in urban areas, and in some select rural areas where it has popular local mayors and figures. It currently has 12 MPs and sends 1 member to EU Parliament, who sits in the Renew Europe group. It is currently headed by Victoria Chemyte-Nelson, a MP and chess master. LS is liberal economically and socially, and pro-EU. It is generally skeptical towards further government regulations, stronger welfare measures, and increased taxes. It also seems to be more sympathetic towards privatization in certain industries. It tends to be socially liberal, saying it disagrees with the statements, quote, immigration must be reduced, and, quote, people who don't know Lithuanian should be prohibited from working in the service sector. Argues on its website that freedom of expression needs to be defended more, and most of its members support gay marriage. It is pro-EU, pro-NATO, and wants to give more support to the Belarusian opposition. LS, compared to many of the other parties we have talked about, is more ideologically coherent, which is an advantage in some sense, as it appears, unlike a lot of other parties, a party that actually stands for something. However, this does open it up to criticism, as those opposed to the liberal agenda of the party will find plenty of reasons to dislike the party. Because it has been in government with TS-LKD twice in a row, I'd imagine it might be seen as a lapdog to TS-LKD. The idea that it plays second fiddle to a more important party might be further reinforced by the fact it is viewed as a bit of a boring party with few hardcore supporters. This makes it difficult for it to campaign, as the party can't rely on name recognition as much. It being boring doesn't mean it's completely controversy-free, however. In the run-up to the 2016 election, when it was doing very well in opinion polls, the party leader at the time was found with a bribe of 80,000 euros in a vodka box, severely damaging the party, leading from it maybe hitting 20% of the vote per opinion polls, to it ending up with just a little less than 10% once elections finally rolled around. We go next to a party I've mentioned briefly throughout the episode, and is for foreign commentators looking at Lithuania, maybe the most exotic party. The Lithuanian Farmers and Green Union, Lietuvos Valstiečių ir Žaliųjų Sąjunga, or LVZS. LVZS is often framed as a green conservative party, a party combining environmentalist thought with conservative social policies. The party's first iteration was the Lithuanian Peasants' Party, a party that traces its origins to the interwar Farmers' Popular Union, and came to represent rural agrarian interests in the country. In the 90s and 2000s, it was a relatively weak party, typically able to win a couple of seats, and even briefly able to get a junior role in the government. It would see a complete change in 2012, when the party rebranded to its current name. The 2016 election saw it reach its peak, aided by populist resentment in Lithuania against the ruling political elites, and Skvernelis would head the Electoralist while not technically being a member of the party. It won over 22% of the vote, and went from a small party with a single MP to the head of the government. However, in subsequent elections, it lost a pretty significant chunk of its support base for reasons I will get into later. It got the most support last election in rural areas, somewhat in the north, and in some certain towns and cities, like Šiauliai. It also has received a decent amount of support from those who were/are strongly opposed to COVID lockdowns. It currently has 8 MPs and sends 1 member to EU Parliament, who sits in the European Conservative and Reformist Group. It is currently headed by Aurelius Verdiga, its sole MEP and former Minister of Healthcare. So how true is the Green Conservative label? Socially, it is fairly conservative. It is hostile towards gay marriage, opposed to increased immigration, backs tough on crime policies, historically opposing lockdown policies during COVID-19, and actually while in charge raised the drinking age to 20. In terms of environmental policies, it has pushed for some policies, like fighting against deforestation and promoting on its website sustainable urbanization in agriculture, but it also opposes a Green New Deal and has generally not made environmental issues the focus of its campaigns, with environmental issues ending up as the 15th section out of 19 on its website. Economically, it does lean towards stronger government intervention in the economy, supporting a 32-hour workweek, supports the creation of a national development bank and a state pharmacy chain, and supports collective bargaining. It also supports more regional autonomy, supports more funding for Lithuanian cultural heritage, and is opposed to corruption, hoping to use funds recovered from removing corruption to fund most of its economic schemes rather than increasing taxes. Ultimately, the party might be best described as ideologically broadly populist. Its populism is often what ends up getting them in trouble. They are often viewed by their opponents as demagogues who are willing to promote anything, no matter how unrealistic, so long as it appeals to their base. They also have been called xenophobic and homophobic, willing to drum up hostile rhetoric against minorities in order to win electoral votes. Its more populist message can largely be attributed to its longtime party leader, Ramūnas Karbauskis, one of the richest men in Lithuania, dominating a large chunk of the agricultural sector in the country, and often accused of shady business practices. The fact that this economically left-wing and Populist Party was headed by the richest man in the country, has also led it to be viewed as rather hypocritical by its critics. Karbauskis' big personality resulted in infighting in the party between him and Skverners, leading to the DSVL breaking off. The party did see massive success in 2016, but since then it's struggled, and especially this last election, going from the second most voted for party in 2020 to 6th place. This resulted in Karbauskis stepping down after the election. The party may be able to turn its negative fortune around if it's able to keep up its populist persona and the time is right, or its base will be eaten up by other rising populist forces like NA and disappear from Lithuanian politics. So now we start getting into the smaller parties, starting off with the Electoral Action of Poles in Lithuania, Christian Families Alliance, Akcja Noboka Polaka Nowicja, Związek Chrześcijański Zrozin, or LLRA-KSS. Really rolls off the tongue. The LLRA-KSS is, as the name suggests, a party representing the Polish minority in Lithuania, which makes up roughly 6% of the population. It was formed in the mid-90s as a party seeking to protect the Polish minority in the country, which has primarily been located in the rural areas around Vilnius, especially the rural southeast. However, it has also tried to ally with the Russian community in the country, and as the second half of the name suggests, is a party that makes a big deal about Christian values and tends to lean right. It's socially conservative, wants to fight discrimination against the Polish minority in the country, supports more autonomy at the local level, is vaguely left-wing economically, supports normalizing relations with Belarus, and is considered broadly sympathetic towards Russia. This position often makes it very disliked among Lithuanian nationalists and liberals, being seen as stooges of the Kremlin and/or holding apologist positions towards the USSR. It also suffers with being accused of corruption, being viewed as a very authoritarian in municipalities and controls, and having an electorate largely relegated to the Polish community, which has been shrinking since independence. This means it's increasingly becoming more difficult to get past the electoral threshold, resulting in a fairly small national presence. It currently has 3 MPs and sends 1 member to EU Parliament, who sits in the European Conservative and Reformist Group. It is headed by Waldemar Tomaszewski, its sole MEP and former MP. Next we go to the National Alliance, or Nationalis Svenviminios, or NS. NS was formed in 2020 from followers of its current leader and former university professor, Vytautas Radžvilas. It's broadly a Christian right and nationalist party, supporting Christian values, being officially enshrined by the government. It's hostile towards LGBTQ rights, opposed to increased immigration, generally hostile towards privatization, and hostile towards the EU. It contested its first election in 2020, failing to win any seats. However, it was able to elect several local councillors in 2023 and managed to win a single MP in 2024. Its last election got the most support in urban areas, especially in Vilnius. The last party with a presence in the Seimas is the center-right Union, or Centro Desviação. The Union actually very recently changed its name to its current name, being called Freedom and Justice, or LT, before June 2025, so there is a chance you haven't heard of the party even if you somewhat follow Lithuanian politics. Anyways, it was formed in 2014 as a merger of 2 center-right liberal parties. In 2020, the party merged with the Order and Justice Party, a Lithuanian nationalist party, although most of its nationalist support base seems to have left it for NA or for Lithuanian, a small movement not really relevant. The party today is based around Artūras Zuokas, an allegedly corrupt and rather eccentric ex-mayor of Vilnius. For example, he ran over an illegally parked car with a tank as a stunt, came to a debate with a box on his head, allegedly did a, quote, tennis ball impersonation, your guess for what that is as good as mine, and claims to have a collection of famous people's DNA, which he could clone in case of a worldwide tragedy. The party is very, very weak, getting less than 8% of the vote last election. But it is able to remain afloat by allowing popular local politicians to use the party as a vehicle to get elected, which is how it was able to win an MP last election. It's unlikely to grow anytime soon, but may stick around as a somewhat niche party for a select few political figures. Zuokas is the party's sole MP. Next, let's look at 2 parties who were able to win a seat in European Parliament this latest EU election. First, we have the Freedom Party, or Laisvės partija, or LP. LP was formed in 2019 as a breakoff of LS, representing a more socially progressive liberal movement and trying to appeal to more young, urban Lithuanians. It is socially progressive, backing gay marriage, marijuana legalization, and stricter environmental protections. It also is economically liberal, sometimes even described as a sort of soft libertarian party, and is pro-Taiwanese. It, in the 2020 election, managed to win an impressive 9.4% of the vote. It worked with both TS-LKD and LS in government from 2020 until 2024, when it was wiped out in parliamentary elections, getting 4.6% of the vote, just barely missing the electoral threshold. It, considering the anti-TS-LKD mood, along with pushback on some of its policies by more conservative voters, led to less votes this time around. It does, however, still have a presence at the local level, and in European elections earlier in 2024 managed to win a seat, owing to lower turnout in EU elections. Its single MEP sits in the Renew Europe group. It is currently headed by Tomos Vytautas Riskavičius, a former MP who apparently refers to himself as a, quote, professional homosexual, which sounds like the name of a really trashy TV show. The second party that managed to win a seat in EU Parliament, but without representation in the Seimas, is People and Justice Union, Centrist Nationalist, or Tautos ir Teisingumo Sąjunga Centristai Tautininkai, or TTS. TTS was originally formed in 2003 as a breakoff of the Lithuanian Centre Union, a minor liberal party in the 90s. TTN since then has served as a fringe right-wing force, getting very limited support throughout the years. The party began to see a bit of change in 2021, when Petras Gražulis, a long-time and rather eccentric MP, was elected as head of the party. Gražulis has been a fairly controversial figure, being one of the leading anti-LGBTQ voices in the country, and taking a very hostile tone towards TS-LKD. Gražulis was impeached from the Seimas in 2023 for pressing another MP's button during a vote. His party was able to get a decent amount of support in EU elections, largely in the West, and Gražulis was able to get elected. The party failed to get any MPs elected in the Seimas elections later that year, however. While I think there is a scenario the LP could re-emerge and get MPs elected into the Seimas, I'm skeptical TTS could do this, considering its biggest political figure is barred from running in the Seimas, and it likely will remain a minor party. Gražulis sits in the Europe of Sovereign Nations group. So those are all the parties in the Seimas, or the EU, but there's a couple of other parties I want to briefly mention. There is the Lithuanian Regions Party, a breakoff of the LSDP. It broke off in 2018 due to a dispute over if the LSDP should continue working in the LVZS coalition, with the Lithuanian Regions Party deciding to continue working with them. It has a stronghold in the Širvintos district, and in 2020 was able to elect several MPs. But last election lost all of its MPs. There is the Labour Party, which has been dominated by Viktor Uspaskich, an oligarch who has broadly backed vaguely populist positions. The party previously was able to achieve a decent amount of success, being the most voted for party in 2004 and 2012, and able to get into government at several points. However, this last election they lost all their representation except at the local level. Next, there is the Lithuanian Green Party. They obviously are an environmentalist party, and have been able to get a couple of members elected at both the national and local level, although infighting apparently has surfaced recently in the party. Other unique ideological parties are the Young Lithuanian Party, representing nationalist thought, the Together Left Alliance and Socialist People's Front, representing socialist thought, the Lithuania for Everyone Party, representing Lithuanians living outside the country, the Samogitia Party, a party promising autonomy for the Samogitia region, and the Values Party, which is based around legalizing sex work. I do want to note that these last couple of parties that I just mentioned are especially irrelevant, and some may essentially be dead. So, those are the parties of Lithuania. In conclusion, the government is the left of the country, being made up of LSDP, a social democratic-ish party representing mainstream economic interventionist thought, the NA Party, based around its leader, Žemaitaitis, representing new populist and xenophobic thought against the status quo, and the DSVL Party, a party based around its party leader, Skverneras, representing moderate technocratic thought. The opposition is largely the right of the country. The largest is the TS-LKD, one of the most powerful parties in the country, and is a party that is both conservative and broadly economically liberal, while also having a strong socially liberal faction in the party. It is in opposition with its longtime ally, the Liberal LS. Also in opposition is the populist, socially conservative, economically interventionist, on paper environmentalist, LVZS, the Polish Interest Party, the LLRA-KSS, and several other smaller parties. Lithuanian politics is largely polarized into those who like and dislike the TS-LKD. It's going to be very interesting seeing how the current government operates, and quite frankly, if it survives, considering the highly controversial NA party is a part of it. How this government will impact Lithuanian politics and its party system is something we'll just have to wait and see. So yeah, I hope you all enjoyed. I want to give a special thank you to Carlis. He helped me out a lot when writing the episode, and he gave me some of those fun facts, especially about the center-right union. Tennis ball impression still is like, I cannot wrap my head around it. But yeah, thanks for listening, thanks for watching. Up next, I will do Singaporean political parties. That episode, I'm going to guess, is pretty short. There's only 2 real parties that I'm going to go into, and then a lot of parties I'm going to quickly skip over. But then after that, I will do the history of the Czech Republic, and then I will do Czech political parties. So, thanks for listening, thanks for watching.